We begin with the latest in Israel's war against Hamas. A small number of Israeli ground forces comprised of tanks, infantry, and armored units is continuing to push into Gaza as Israeli warplanes strike hundreds of targets. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today rejected calls for a ceasefire, saying that, quote, Israel is fighting the enemies of civilization itself. And this comes as Israel urges the evacuation of northern Gaza hospitals where Hamas is believed to be operating. The World Health Organization says the hospitals, which are damaged and overflowing, can't evacuate without endangering lives. We're joined now by Ron Dermer, Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs and a former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Ambassador Dermer, thank you for joining us. It's an honor to have you here tonight.
Good to be with you, Lindsay.
So Israel is fighting multiple Iranian-backed fronts right now, to the north of you and to the east. Do you believe that Israeli citizens are safer now than they were before the attacks of October 7th?
They certainly are, because you see what has happened since the attacks. On that terrible, horrific day where we lost 1,500 people, and Lindsay, Israel's a country of fewer than 10 million people. America's about 40 times the size of Israel. So to lose 1,500 people, to have that murdered, is about 50 to 60,000 Americans. So it's about 29 11s. And I think people were very, very concerned, but our military has rallied. We have now mobilized our reserves. We are fighting for a victory against Hamas in the south, and we are deterring Hezbollah aggression in the north. And so we have two fronts. And we also have others in the region that have attacked Israel. We have the Houthis in Yemen, also backed by Iran. We have the Shia militias in Iraq, also backed by Iran. So we have an entire axis of terror led by Iran that is threatening us, but we are going to fight and we're going to win. The Prime Minister made that clear on October 7th. And this round, Lindsay, that we've had several rounds with Gaza over the last few years that I'm sure your viewers have followed, this round is going to be the last round. We are going to eliminate Hamas as a military and political leadership in Gaza.
Ambassador, some of your Israeli forces are already in Gaza, but your full-scale ground invasion has yet to begin. Can you give us a sense of what is next?
Well, I'm in the War Cabinet, an observer there, so I'm not going to get into any kind of operational details. Let's just say that we are very determined to achieve the goal that was set out by the Israeli cabinet, which is to eliminate their military capabilities, Hamas's military capabilities, to end Hamas's rule in Gaza, and to ensure that Gaza no longer represents a threat to Israel. So you can't leave a remnant of Hamas there. You can't just cripple it and walk away, because then they're just going to build themselves up again. We've learned that lesson right now. And after that horrific attack on October 7th, I think the people of Israel are resolved to eliminate Hamas once and for all. And that's what we're going to do. How we do it is a question that the world will see in the days, weeks, and even months ahead, because it's very hard fighting in Gaza. It took your forces in Mosul maybe 9 months when you were fighting the Islamic State there in an urban area. It takes a long time to do it. So I know everybody wants a rapid victory. We would like a rapid victory, but the most important thing is to achieve the goal of a victory and to free Gaza from Hamas once and for all.
One of the challenges that your forces face is that Hamas has miles of tunnel under Gaza, which presents enormous risk for your troops. How prepared are they for the complexities of this ground invasion?
You're quite right. It's very difficult. I mentioned Mosul before. The Islamic State was there for maybe a couple of years. Hamas has been there for almost 2 decades, and they have been building this underground terror tunnel network that goes north and south. And the amount of money, by the way, that they have spent, where the international community was constantly pressuring Israel, get goods into Gaza, get cement and concrete so that you can build hospitals and schools and homes for the Palestinians. But they diverted all those resources for this underground terror tunnel network. The other thing that your viewers should know, I think you mentioned it earlier when you opened your report, is that they use their hospitals as command centers. Sort of the hubs of their underground terror tunnel network are the hospitals. This is an evil enemy that uses their own people as human shields. Not only do they deliberately target our civilians, our men, women, and children, slaughtering them, burning them alive, kidnapping over 200 Israelis and murdering 1,500. But they also use their own people as human shields, and they do not respect any of the laws of war. Israel does, and Israel's fighting and targeting the terrorists, and we are doing everything to keep Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. In the north, Lindsay, you should know, the northern part of Gaza, around 90% of people have left the areas that we're fighting, and that's a good thing, because we want the battle to be our soldiers, which are very determined and very well trained to fight against their terrorists. And if it's Israel versus Hamas, definitely bet on Israel.
Mr. Ambassador, once again, thanks for joining us this evening. Joe Gum here. I'm glad you brought up the point about the hospitals. Israel is warning hospitals in northern Gaza to evacuate, but the World Health Organization says they cannot do that. Hamas is believed to operate out of the hospitals. So how do you navigate this challenge?
Well, one thing we're trying to do, Joe, is to get a lot of different options for medical care of Palestinians who are wounded or sick in Gaza. So you have the French, for instance, are sending a vessel, which is now moving off the coast. It should be there today or tomorrow off the coast of Gaza that can treat patients. We've also cordoned off an area. There's an area in the southern part of the Strip, the southwest part of the Gaza Strip, which has essentially become a humanitarian safe zone. And we're hoping that the Red Cross and the World Health Organization will set up field hospitals there. There's some discussions about potentially a field hospital in Sinai to treat wounded. What we have to do is to have many, many different options so we can actually get the Palestinian civilians, get their wounded out of harm's way, and do the job that we have to do, which is take out Hamas and take out this underground terror fortress that they have built up. Now, we're doing that slowly and deliberately in the north, but it's hard going. And the faster we get the Palestinian civilians out of harm's way, the better of a job we're going to do. And that's what we're trying to do now, and to figure out all of these other alternatives where Palestinian patients who are sick or wounded can go.
Outside of the hostages who have been released in that safe zone, some of them, which you just brought up a minute ago, there is now word that some of the hostages are dead and that a female German-Israeli tourist from the music festival was paraded through Gaza and tortured to death. What can you add, and what can you tell us about others being held?
Well, you know, as from October 7th, every day, because of the scope of the slaughter and also the atrocities that they committed. I mean, they burnt people alive. And we have specialists of DNA that can't even find out who these people are. So day after day, we've had people to try to identify those who have been killed. And as you mentioned today, one of the families who thought that their daughter, their loved one, was kidnapped, just got the horrible news that she was one of the people who were murdered. This is an enemy that we have not seen. It's worse than ISIS. I'll tell you even more than that, Joe. As a Jew, you know, you never want to compare anything to the Holocaust because of the scope and scale of that. And just to put it in your viewers' minds, in 1944, they were murdering 10,000 Jews every single day in Auschwitz. So it's a totally different scale. But I'll tell you one difference between the Nazis and Hamas is Hamas are Nazis with GoPros, meaning they're filming it. The Nazis hid their crimes from the world. They tried to destroy the evidence of their crimes. They didn't celebrate the murderers for the SS. They hid them and tried to con the world that this wasn't happening. You had Nazi officials that would actually give tours of the Red Cross as late as 1944 to tell them, no, we're not actually doing this. Here you have an evil that is uploading videos of their atrocities. That's why it's so important for the world to rally behind Israel and wipe this evil off the face of the earth. Just like the world stood together and got rid of ISIS, just like the allies of the world understood that you can't make compromises with the Nazis, you got to actually finish them, take down that regime militarily and politically. The world has to back Israel so that we can destroy this evil, because if it rises again here, it's going to be coming close to you one day. We have to have a victory in Gaza, and it has to resonate not only among all of Israel's enemies, but among all the enemies of civilization around the world. Lindsay said at the beginning, this is a battle between the forces of civilization and the civilization of and the forces of barbarism. If you cannot stand with Israel in this fight, you will never stand with Israel. That's why it's so important for all the civilized world to stand with Israel now.
Qatar has reportedly played a key role, Ambassador, in negotiating on behalf of the hostages. Is there an opportunity for a stronger partnership with countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia once the war comes to a close?
Well, look, I would put Qatar and Saudi Arabia in very different categories. Saudi Arabia is a country that I think has changed over the last decade. I think they'd like to see peace and prosperity in the region, and I think they're a potential partner for Israel. I'll tell you, the way that we'll get to this historic Israeli-Saudi peace is to have a victory in Gaza, because people don't make peace with losers. They don't make peace with those who are weak. They make peace with the strong and peace with victors. And a victory over Hamas, I think, will pave the path to an Israeli-Saudi peace. I think Qatar is a different situation entirely. They have funded Hamas for a very long time to the tunes of $5, $10, $15 million a month. I think what the Qataris should be doing right now, Joe, the most important thing they can do is to show the world that they can bring our hostages home. Then they'd be valuable to me. Until I see that, I don't see the great value in Qatar. And I think a lot of pressure has to be brought to bear on Qatar. They have to know that the world expects them to use this so-called relationship that they have to free women, children, soldiers. You have over 30 children who are being held hostage right now. You have babies being held hostage right now by Hamas. Those people have to be freed unconditionally. And I think a lot of people have to have a lot of conversations with Qatari officials who talk about the relationships they have with with forces throughout the region. Let's see if we can get those hostages free. Then I would be the first country to thank Qatar.
I know there are many families hoping that you can. You mentioned how long this war could actually take, Ambassador, and I know that's something that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated as well. Have you received what you need in military equipment and aid at this point from the United States? I mean, as you know, the U.S. has yet to approve Biden's proposed $14 billion in aid.
Well, I think you had a little problem in your House of Representatives for a while there, and it's good that the United States has a speaker that can, I think, work together with the Senate in order to address some of the great challenges that the United States faces at home and in the world. But we're very grateful that the Biden administration had put forward a very robust package that will help give us the tools we need to defend ourselves. I can tell you that over the last 3 weeks, we've been in close coordination and cooperation with the Biden administration. We appreciate the strong words out of the gate, specifically the moral clarity. When the President of the United States says that Hamas is worse than ISIS and is sheer evil, I think that's the right tone. And we work closely with the administration over the last few weeks. And I hope that support will continue. It's been very strong. I can tell you myself, I've been on the phone with the White House basically every day. I think the president and the prime minister have spoken 8, 10, 12 times over this 24-day period. So that cooperation and support is there. And I hope that it will sustain as we go through this long slog, because this is not a simple war. Look, everybody wants Israel to defeat Hamas, but they think that there's a stopwatch there, that we can do it in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Remember, you were 9 months in Mosul. And I would tell you something else, Lindsay, that the faster we go, the more difficult it is to keep Palestinian civilians out of harm's way, and the more difficult it will be for our troops. The slower we go, the more deliberate we are. I think we're going to ultimately achieve our objective, but we'll do it in a way that keeps Palestinian civilians as much as possible out of harm's way and also protects our troops.
That's good to hear. So if you are able to thoroughly dismantle Hamas, as the goal is, are you concerned that Iran will just back another terrorist group to fill the void?
No, because we're not going to allow a void to happen in Gaza. I think October 7th, I think, was a wake-up call for the people of Israel. We're just not going to allow a terror group to be spawned again on our southern border. I think the issue will be with Hezbollah in the north, which right now we're deterring them. As you and your viewers know, there have been skirmishes now in the north, attempts to attack us. And you've had this kind of ping pong that has happened there. We have hit Hezbollah positions. They've lost dozens of their soldiers. They're terrorists, frankly, because Hezbollah is another terror organization. But we're trying to deter a potential war in the north. Now, Hezbollah may decide to escalate and then we're going to have no choice to also be in another front fighting a much more dramatic war. We're prepared for it. We don't seek it. We seek to deter them from getting involved. But because they basically work for Iran, and Iran can push their proxies throughout the region, which they have with the Houthis, as I mentioned before, in Yemen, or Shia militias in Iraq, to attack us, to attack you, your forces there, to attack American military bases there. They could push Hezbollah to get into the fight, and then we're going to have no choice but to respond. And I can tell you, Lindsay, the force that we will use against Hezbollah is going to make them rue the day that they ever got into this. We hope they don't make that decision, but our army is mobilized on our northern border. Our population is largely not there in the border towns. So we're ready for a fight, but we don't seek it. If we have to, we will, and we'll win on two fronts.
Ambassador, it's been written that much like 9/11 in the U.S., this war has brought Israelis of different political stripes together. We assume that such a coming together can only be helpful as you fight this war.
That's a good point, Joe. There's no question, because there was a sense of disunity in Israel that we've seen actually for several years, and even in the months before the attack, it seemed that it was getting worse and worse. And then all of a sudden, and I think, our enemies may have thought Israel's divided, Israel's not going to rally. And then what happened is, in the wake of this October 7th attack, an immediate change happened throughout the country. And the whole people were united and filled with an unbelievable resolve to stand together and to defeat this enemy. And you see it happening throughout Israeli society. We've had ultra-Orthodox who have now said they're going to join the armies by the hundreds and the thousands. We've had volunteers that have spread across Israel to help businesses, because we're a citizens army, as you know, Joe. So when you call up 300,000 Israelis in a population of about 9 million people, in addition to our standing army, you got a lot of people who are leaving the workforce, a lot of jobs that need to be filled, and you have volunteers working throughout Israeli society, and also the support network for the 200 or so families. There's a lot of hostages that there's more than one from the same family that's been kidnapped. But whether it's 120 or 140, 150 families who have hostages there, they've rallied and embraced them. The whole country has embraced these families. So I think Israel is more united than I've ever seen it. I've been here since 1996. I was born and raised, as you can hear from my accent, in the United States, but I've been here since 1996, and I've never seen the country as united as it is today.
We're glad to see that. And as you mentioned, growing up in the U.S., your family grew up here in the States, including when you were the Israeli ambassador in Washington. How are they handling life in this new and very dangerous period?
Well, it's hard. I have one son. My eldest is in the Army, and he's working around the clock. His commander came in the other day and at around 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning and told them, you guys got to get some sleep, because they're so determined and devoted to do whatever they can to defeat this enemy and to protect their people. I have another son who's going to go into the Army in a few months, and he's just upset that he's not there already. He's going to a blood bank or seeing to figure out what can he do to help. And I have 5 children, and also 3 more children, including a little girl who's 10 years old. But it's hard because we have rockets fired at us every day. You have these red alerts and sirens and people who are running for shelter. And you live in Jerusalem, which is, everything in Israel is close to each other. But compared to those bordering communities around Gaza, you're pretty far away. And you think to yourself, my children have to run 1 or 2 times a day to the shelter, and the difficulty that they have doing that. Imagine the people who lived in the communities around Gaza, in a city like Sderot, that would have to do it thousands of times, and the psychological impact that it had on an entire generation of Israelis. That's why this round is going to be the last round. We are not going to allow another terror organization to spawn in Gaza. From my point of view, the area around Gaza, where those communities were and where they've been decimated by what Hamas did on October 7th, we will know that we have achieved a victory when that is the safest place to live in Israel. When those communities are rebuilt and the people who come there know that they now live in the safest place in the state of Israel. If we can say that, and if people can feel that, then we know we will have achieved a great victory.
Well, we pray that that day comes soon for the Israeli people. Our hearts and prayers are with you, Ambassador, and all the people of Israel tonight and the Jewish community around the world. Thank you for spending so much time with us this evening, and you are welcome back to Centerpoint anytime.
Thank you.